Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Creative Tarot, A Modern Guide to an Inspired Life by Jessa Crispin, narrated by Chloe Cannon. Introduction. Like a lot of teenagers who wore too much black and had an extensive incense collection, I used to fool around with a tarot deck. I can't remember where I picked it up, some bookstore somewhere. It was exciting to look at all of the images, all of the mysterious men and women fighting with swords or juggling coins or drinking from cups. But after a few aborted attempts to teach myself to read the cards, I gave up. The manual that came with the cards gave inadequate and confusing definitions. The Empress, wife, mother, companion. That detracted from what I was seeing. Unsure of what to do with the cards, I put them away, and they were lost in one move or another. 10 years later, I came back to the tarot during a particularly difficult time in my life. With the help of a skilled reader, I was able to see my circumstances differently. She helped me find the narrative inside all the muddle. In short, she told me a new story about my life and what I was experiencing. A story I could move through. A story in which I could see how all of the other characters and situations were operating. After that, I was hooked. I began the slow process of studying the meaning of the tarot and understanding its uses. At the time, I worked mostly as a book critic, and I was intrigued by the way the cards could be used as a tool for storytelling. Each reading is, essentially, a story. It begins here, at the center. One card represents you and tells you who you are as the protagonist. Others say what's happening to you, what did happen to you, what will happen. Other cards show up as people wandering into your story. Others create plot and action. You lay out the cards, and there on the table you have the outline. You have the who, what, where, and when. You then flesh out that skeleton with your own circumstances. You populate it with the people in your life, and, using the intuitive cues provided by the card's images, you fit your story onto the story in the cards. It is not necessarily about telling the future, it is about retelling the present. After noticing the way the cards hook into your intuition and imagination, I realized that they could easily be used to assist in the creative process. When stuck on a piece, I'd pull some cards to find clarity, or I'd use them to figure out how to structure it. When friends struggled with their book or visual art projects, I'd pull out my deck and we'd take a look. Soon, most of my tarot clients were artists, looking for a little guidance on what to work on next, or how to overcome a block. What is the tarot? The tarot is a deck of cards designed during the Renaissance. There is debate about whether the card's origins stretch back further, but for our purposes, we'll stick with what we know for sure. The deck consists of two parts, the major arcana and the minor arcana. The major arcana is made up of what you can consider archetypes, the hermit, death, the high priestess, and so on. The minor arcana cards illustrate circumstances and conflicts, the kinds of things that add action to a story. The minor arcana comes in 4 suits that correspond with the 4 elements: cups, water, wands, fire, swords, air, and coins or pentacles, earth. Each suit has cards numbering 1 through 10, and then 4 court cards: page, knight, queen, and king. The cards depict the whole realm of human experience, from love to death, from joy to sorrow, from loneliness to friendship. Some cards are particularly nasty. Others easily cheer a reader up. But either way, you have to take the dark with the light, just like in life. The interpretations of the cards change as society changes. The Lover's card, of course, does not require a man and a woman to fulfill its meaning. And at one point, I read in an old tarot book that the 3 of Wands indicated that a family member was going to die and leave me a chateau in his or her will. But the 3 of Wands no longer means free chateau. Now it means exploration and adventure. You will experience the cards differently than I will. because they are based on your own experiences and your own philosophy and values. Just because we may have different takes on a card doesn't mean that I can't learn from your interpretations, and I hope you can learn something from mine. How do I use this book? As a starting point, each card has its own thorough interpretation and guidance on how it relates specifically to creativity. I've designed a few new ways to organize the cards for reading what are called spreads for different creative problems. Wanting to start writing or painting or working on your medium of choice, but unsure how to begin. Restarting a project that has become blocked or lost its way. Figuring how best to present a project to the world. And getting out of a rut to try something new and daring. The book is also meant to be a source of inspiration. Because I believe firmly in looking to our betters to teach us and guide us, I have included anecdotes of creators throughout time to show how others have overcome obstacles, as well as recommendations of paintings to study, books to read, music to listen to, films to watch, etc. Remember, the Greeks believed our genius was not part of us, but was a divine visitation. Our jobs, as artists and writers, was to become the best possible vessel for that genius. Part of that is to be forever learning, improving, expanding, and experimenting. Questions. Is it okay for me to buy my own tarot cards? I read somewhere that your first deck is supposed to be a gift. It is absolutely okay for you to buy your first tarot deck. That is one of those mystical mumbo-jumbo things designed to make beginners feel inadequate and unwelcome. I have a Virgo moon. I have no time for such nonsense. Is the tarot just about telling the future? People have always wanted to know their fates. Will I be rich? Will I be wise? Will I fall in love? And they have used whatever they had around them to try to sneak a glimpse into the future. I'm always very curious about the different methods used and the way they were developed. I've had my face read in Chinatown, dragged there by a Malaysian friend who swears it's an accurate, ancient practice. I've had my palm read by people in multiple countries. In Greece, I had my coffee grounds read. I sipped my Turkish coffee while chatting with the very nice woman. Then my cup was inverted on its saucer, and the shape the grounds made was interpreted to tell me my future. I had a woman in the American South read my cards, but she used a deck of playing cards rather than the tarot. I've had my tea leaves read in London and my astrological chart read in New York City. There are many other ways to tell your fortune. There's numerology, the telling of your fate by the numbers of your birthday or the number of letters in your name. There's bibliomancy, where you open a book to a random page and line, and through that your future is revealed. There's ceromancy, for which you pour melted wax onto a surface and read the shapes it makes. There's an old Irish New Year's custom that requires you to melt metal and then pour it into cold water. The shape it hardens into will tell you how your year will be. Many believe that your dreams can tell you your future, if you sleep with certain items under your pillow or drink or eat the right things before bed. With pyromancy, you gaze into a fire. With tyromancy, you look at the coagulation of cheese. There's divination by the shapes of clouds, the shapes of the facets of gemstones, the entrails of a sacrificed pigeon or rabbit, which is to say that the impulses are all the same, as are the methods, although the medium changes from culture to culture and from person to person. We take an image, this shape of the candle wax or that image on the tarot card, and imbue it with meaning. That meaning is personal to us. It draws something out of us. So if we have been feeling lonely lately, wondering if we will ever see an end to our dry spell and if we'll ever fall in love again, we might see a man's silhouette in that wax. That doesn't make us foolish or delusional. Maybe it gives us hope. Maybe it prepares something in us. We see that a man is on his way this year, and so we dress up a little. We look around and pay closer attention to the men who swing through our lives, our depression and loneliness, which maybe had been keeping us isolated by making us unwilling to go out and socialize, lessen, and we start trying again. Maybe we meet a man that year because of this, or maybe we don't, but maybe in the act of trying, of going out and seeing people again, we start to fall back in love with our own lives, and the whole man thing becomes less of a priority. We give things meaning by paying attention to them, and so moving your attention from one thing to another can absolutely change your future. Exactly who or what is doing the work here, whether fate is choosing the card, or your unconscious, or random chance, doesn't matter as much as the act of seeing, sensing, and paying attention. How do the individual cards take on specific meanings? If we're supposed to interpret the images and use our intuition to guide us, all on our own, then why does the Ten of Swords have the same meaning from deck to deck? In every culture, certain symbols take on certain meanings, and so the mixing of those symbols, adding an element to a number, to a Greek god, to an astrological marker, would create more complex meanings. Part of that is the way stories are constructed and understood. And if you establish a meaning for one aspect of the card, say that sword refers to air, and air refers to thought and communication, then it makes sense that a story would arise rather naturally from a progression. Swords is an easy way to understand this, because its progression shows that as the numbers go higher, the darkness of the cards increase. One sword is a helpful thing to have. You can maneuver it, you can use it as a weapon or as a tool. It is easily carried around. Just as one idea or one philosophy can be used as a tool to order your thoughts. But with two swords, things get unwieldy. You either have to choose one and discard the other, or both of your hands are full, and you're not so easily mobile anymore. Just like with two ideas, all of a sudden you have a contradiction, or a choice has to be made. The more you add, the harder it is to carry all of these swords, and the more your mind can spin out of control. So that's part of it. But mostly the meaning comes from centuries of people writing, thinking, and using the tarot, and sharing their experiences. There is no right or wrong way to think about the tarot, but there are going to be shared meanings. Let's consider the history of the word consider. I'm taking this from Russell A. Lockhart's book, Words as Eggs, Psyche in Language and Clinic, a kind of psychological etymology book. The other major system of divination and intuitive response of our time is astrology. Now, some people draw the line there. They'll say they believe in tarot. Believe is certainly the wrong word, but it's common parlance. Use is more accurate. But not in astrology, because they consider astrology fortune-telling. And it can be. Some people use it that way, just as they use curds of cheese or shapes of clouds to predict the future. But others of us use it simply as a way to draw our attention to certain parts of our lives and expand our understanding of what's happening to us and with us. It's a way of creating meaning. The sitter part of consider comes from the word for star, like the word sidereal, which means of or with respect to distant stars, or siderated, which means planet-struck. A sidus, then, was someone who paid attention to the stars, and as this person paid attention to the stars, she would begin to notice certain patterns. When a star or a planet was positioned just so, certain things would happen in her life or in the world, and she would note it. And when there was a different combination of stars, the circumstances would change, and she would note it. And so consider started its life as consider, meaning with the stars, coexisting. Our Sidus would share her knowledge with another Sidus, and so on, until a system of meaning and symbolism was built up. And that's how the rather complex system of astrology was born. I don't believe in God, so you can be an atheist and use the tarot. You can be a Christian and use the tarot. There is a long history of writing about chance and synchronicity that has nothing to do with the gods meddling in our realm. I bet that made you uncomfortable, didn't it? You get out of the tarot what you put in. It is merely a tool that works on an intuitive, rather than logical, level. No gods required. What if I'm a total beginner to tarot? Or what if I've never written a thing in my life? I worked very hard to provide something for everyone, no matter his or her level of expertise. That's both for readers' familiarity with the tarot and for how advanced they are in their creative expression. That said, it's important to remember there is no right or wrong way to interpret a card. I have been studying tarot for a long time, but I am constantly surprised and learning more. This book is not meant to be the last word on the tarot. Consider it one step in the process, or a friend to help you along the way. How long does it take to learn the tarot? It all depends on how often you use the cards and for what purposes, and how much you decide to read and study about them. It took me about 8 years before I felt comfortable reading for other people for pay, but you might feel like you've mastered the cards in a year or two. Which tarot cards should I buy? It seems like there are so many different decks to choose from. Whichever deck is most comfortable for you is the right tarot deck. There are a lot of options out there. I have several different decks, including the Spolia deck I made with the artist Jen May, and I switch them out depending on mood. Tarot decks can get a little addictive. The art is so beautiful, and each one has a different feel. My own favorites are the Golden, a contemporary deck that features medieval art, the Heindel, a very complex and non-traditional German deck, and the Minchiate, a Renaissance-era deck that has 96 cards instead of the more standard 78. Each one has its strengths and weaknesses. I find the Minchiate most helpful for creative issues, but I'll almost always turn to the Golden if I have a problem with love. Feel free to experiment. There are online resources such as Facade.com, that feature databases of images from a wide range of decks. Can I read my own cards? For things like relationship troubles, or money troubles, or why do I want to stab my coworker with a screwdriver every time I see him, kind of work-related problems, it helps to get an outside perspective. But for daily card draws, for creativity questions, things of that nature, it's pretty easy to read for yourself. If you're still confused, you can always talk to a friend about the cards you drew, or swap readings with each other. Don't feel like you always have to fork out money for a professional every time you have a problem. A few thoughts. There is no right or wrong way to express your creativity. There is no perfect way to write a novel. There is no ideal way for a painter to work or for a chef to create a new dish, or for a musician to put together a new album. And that is the wonderful and terrifying thing about it. With no rules, how does one keep from getting lost? I talk to creators all the time who feel like they are wandering around in the dark. They want to know, why is this taking so long? Why doesn't it work for me the way it seems to work for everyone else? I feel like I'm not making any progress. Should I give up? Nothing kills creativity faster than anxiety, worrying if you're doing things right, worrying that no one else is going to like what you're doing, panicking about how it's all going to turn out. Almost every time, the solution is listening to and honoring your intuitive sense of not what you think you need, but what your project needs to come to fruition. Maybe that is the greatest thing the cards can do for us. Quiet down our worried thoughts and our expectations for how it's supposed to go, and help us get back in touch with our imagination. A History of the Tarot. The history of the deck we recognize as the tarot, the deck that includes both the minor arcana and the 22 characters and archetypes of the major arcana, begins in 15th century Italy. But the tarot came in many different varieties, even from the very beginning. There is a Florentine deck called the Minchiate, with its 40-card major arcana set, and a deck from Milan called the Trionfi that used 4 types of birds rather than the 4 elements of the standard deck. Many parts of its origins remain frustratingly obscure. For example, what does the name tarot mean? No one really knows, although there are many theories. It comes from the Italian word tarocco, which is the name of the card game that the deck was originally used to play. But the word seems to have no other meaning associated with it. There is a type of blood orange called the tarocco, but it's unlikely that the deck was developed as a way of thinking about citrus. The tarocco cards were simply another version of playing cards, which were designed and played with all over the world, dating back to 9th century China. They spread from there to Egypt, Persia, Turkey, and beyond. Each culture adapted the cards to create decks of their own and designed different games to match. You might have noticed how closely the minor arcana resembles our own standard deck of playing cards with its aces, the numbers up to 10, and then the royalty cards. The knight becomes the jack, the page is discarded, the queen and king remain the same. Even the suits match up, hearts to cups, and so on. Each deck shares a similar origin. So why is one deck used for these mysterious, sometimes occult purposes, while the other is used for play? The game the cards were designed for, the taroko, has been lost to time. You don't see people playing it anymore. But even as people lost interest in the game, the deck remained. As the tarot cards spread and were adapted by different cities and different cultures, new variations appeared. We still have many examples of these early decks, and many of the distinctive choices of imagery were developed in the 15th century and are still found in contemporary decks. The distinctive shape of the hanged man's legs, forming a 4, with one straight leg and one bent knee, can be found in the 15th century Visconti Sforza deck. The pierced heart of the 3 of Swords can also be found in the 16th century Solabusca deck, originating probably in Venice. The Solabusca is one of the few tarot decks that created distinctive imagery for the minor arcana. In early versions, most designed these cards the simple way we design playing cards. The 4 of coins has only 4 coins on it, not the little man clutching his coins to his chest. Many decks added whimsical flourishes, but they weren't necessarily connected to what we understand as being the meaning of the card today. For instance, the monkey gazing at his reflection in a hand mirror on the Minchiade's 4 of Cups has long been one of my favorite such flourishes, but I can't say that it's really enhanced my understanding of that particular card. From Italy, the tarot traveled to France, where the Marseille deck was developed. This is the template from which most modern decks are derived. The major arcana stabilized at this point, settling into the set of 22 trumps we use now. Before this, some decks had a Western Emperor and an Eastern Emperor instead of an Empress and an Emperor. But the Marseille became the template, and the wild variations in the decks faded away, and the standard structure emerged. The Marseille is also when the tarot began to take on a more, let's say, mystical quality. Alchemical and astrological imagery began to show up on the cards, and it's around this time we have the first evidence that the cards were used for divination as well as game-playing. Robert M. Place, in his book, The Tarot, History, Symbolism, and Divination, points to a cycle of Venetian sonnets called the Merlini-Coccai sonnets, Coccai being the pseudonym of the 16th century Italian poet Teofilo Folengo, as containing the first written record of the cards being used for fortune-telling. In the sonnets, the major arcana cards are used in a spread to foresee what will happen to the characters of the story. The written record about the occult use of the tarot begins in about the early 18th century. I know what you're thinking, or maybe not. Maybe you are less of a history dork than I am. Hey, isn't that around the time of the Enlightenment? Wasn't the whole point of the Enlightenment to totally get rid of all superstition and irrational belief? Yes, that was the point. But here's a little secret. Man cannot live on rationality alone. We're not machines. Our brains are not computers. You can try to shut off your dream world, your irrationality, your religious beliefs, your need for mystery and greater meaning, and so on. But most of us really do need that side of ourselves. If it were possible for man to be 100% rational about all things, then the French writer Voltaire, king of the Enlightenment, probably would not have been a crazy, racist anti-Semite. So, at the time of the Enlightenment, there was the Counter-Enlightenment, focused mostly in Germany. The Counter-Enlightenment thinkers argued for more enchantment, more untamed nature, less rationality. You might know these guys as the Romantics. They were philosophers, writers, poets, and artists, although not all of them were German. But they fought against the influence of the Enlightenment and became influential themselves, which only goes to show that when you stake out a radical position, Like, the rational brain is the only thing that matters. All else is a weakness that must be overcome. You are nurturing the extreme opposite of your position into existence as well, something that the Tarot's Chariot card knows very well. Part of the counter-enlightenment was the development of mystery cults. Starting in the 17th century, we had Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. Both developed and spread esoteric knowledge, although you had to be an initiated member to learn their secrets. Moving on, we had Theosophy and Swedenborgianism, which were radically new religions, heavy on the mystical and philosophical side of belief. In the 19th century, the counter-enlightenment spread to America with spiritualism, and then names you're probably more familiar with. Groups like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, people like Madame Blavatsky, a.k.a. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the Russian occultist who co-founded the Theosophical Society, and so on. The Golden Dawn and other groups like it believed in magic, and in the ability of the human will to change matter and the course of events. The question of why all of these systems started to develop around the same time is an interesting one. It was obviously answering a need in people, otherwise it wouldn't have spread the way it did. Part of that has to do with the Enlightenment and this focus on the rational mind, but part of that also can be traced to the evolution that Christianity was going through. Christianity was the dominant religion of the West. Protestantism was relatively new, but it had taken a firm hold, and the Catholic Church adapted to survive against the Protestant ideas, lest its power wane. Christianity was becoming more of a moral code, a system of preferred behaviors and a way of controlling the populace than before. Church services had been a sensory experience, with incense and religious art and music and chanting, all designed to move a person spiritually and to create altered states, if you will. But the Protestant iconoclasts, who believed that religious imagery was idolatry, had destroyed much of the religious art and emptied the churches of their adornments. In place of the music and chanting came lectures on morality. Don't do this instead. I am oversimplifying this to preserve space, but there is an enormous difference in the role of religion in the medieval church and its subsequent role post-Reformation. Some of the primary differences were the removal of artwork and imagery from the religious ceremonies, increased policing of behavior, and de-emphasizing the role of mystery and intuition in a person's life. But by staking out their radical position, they nurtured their extreme opposite's position too. That sense of magic and wonder had answered a call in the human soul, and so it could not be discarded so quickly. New systems of belief, which put the mystery at the very heart of its teachings, began to develop. The cults themselves might have disappeared by now, but much of what they revived interest in, from tarot to astrology to meditation, can be found in contemporary culture with the rise of Wicca and other pagan religions and other systems of, I mean this affectionately, irrational belief. The Golden Dawn had probably the most influence on our contemporary understanding of the tarot. For this group of magicians and mystics, it was one tool of many in their magical system that pulled from sources like the Rosicrucians and the Kabbalah. One of the Golden Dawn's founders, Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers, wrote the first guide to the tarot in England. The Tarot, its occult signification, use in fortune-telling and methods of play. Published in 1888, the same year the Golden Dawn came into existence, established tarot as a magical tool, and standardized the deck, or tried to. Variations soon emerged, into the 4 suits of wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. The Golden Dawn actually didn't last very long. Infighting and power plays, mostly by the male members, splintered the group. Its most famous member was perhaps the Irish poet William Butler Yeats, who remained interested in and engaged with magical systems until his death. The writer and magician Aleister Crowley is often associated with the group, but he was quickly ejected from its ranks for being a terrible person. This is a fact. He was a terrible person. Look it up. But 2 of its lesser-known members would spread the influence of the tarot far and wide. Writer Arthur Edward Waite and artist Pamela Coleman Smith. While Mathers might have standardized the deck's layout, Waite and Smith standardized it.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?